In the last class, we have been discussing Vairagyam. So while explaining Vairagyam, Adi Shankaracharya highlighted Indriyartheshu Sabdadeshu. So every with reference to all the sense objects begins with Sabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandhaiti. Now that is divided into two categories. One is Drushta, other one is Adrushta. That is visible and other one that is not visible. So with reference to that, again what is not ordinarily Bhogeshu iti. So why? Because it is not what is visible, what is not visible, but there is some Bhogam. So this is Bhogam that I want to enjoy. So when you read newspaper, that's better word, you see different type of news, but really even if Drushtam and Adrushtam, maybe that is related to your town or far away, that is not visible, not known. But do you remember everything and do you really bother? But you bother where there is some type of Bhogam. Where directly or indirectly some type of enjoyment or sense of enjoyment is involved. So that's why he says, look, Bhogeshu Viraga Bhava iti Vairagyam. So withdrawing this Ragam. Ragam means that I am attached to that. I would like to repeat. So that is called here Vairagya iti. And of course, while discussing this thing, we said, look, then comes Ahankara. So here, uses this word Anahankara. So Anahankara means Ahankara Abhava iti. So what is the absence of Ahankara? So what is Ahankara? Ahankara is nothing called Aham Karomi iti bhava. This is another word, okay? Aham Karomi. I do. So in anywhere and everywhere, this I gets into and starts claiming it. So if we try to look at this word Ahankara, we have different ways of looking at. We say this Ahankara, what we say in short, I and me. Me and minus. Actually, this can be divided into two categories. One we call as constructive, other one we call as destructive. Let us be a little bit careful how it is being developed and how it happens, what happens, because it is also equally important to know how it really works. So if we try to see very carefully, please understand, this Ahankara, both constructive and destructive, that is being developed from our early childhood. If we observe a child, especially infant, also experiences some type of undifferentiated awareness. And slowly you will discover, that's why the child will be holding on to mother. And whomsoever mother introduces or wherever child feels comfortable, only will go to that person. So that we say gradually through the interaction, of course with mainly mother, of course you can say nowadays parents and environment. Now child starts distinguishing between the self and others. So they are mine, my people, they are others. Even though the ego is not that strong, still there is some type of differentiation. In fact, we call that child is God as long as the child doesn't have sense of ego or ahankara. As long as there is no sense of I, me and mine, that long we consider the child as God. So that's why we say the child starts developing. That's why same child when starts crying, suppose the toy is lost or somebody snatches away the toy or it falls down, what happens to the child? Child starts crying. So when child starts crying, what does it happen? What is the background behind it? Because child understands that toy that belongs to me, that mineness is missing. So that means the child has developed sense of mineness. Now same child starts growing, especially comes to this adolescence period, which is very important. Like, life, in our life, let us say, very particular, peculiar time, each of us. There, what happens? That identity formation happens. So you can say stronger identity formation happens. So how does it happen? By making the ego stronger. That's why you can see how does it happen? In adolescence period, there is comparison. Peer, we call peer comparison. Without comparison, there is no adolescence. And of course, you can see because of your comparison, self-image, your social image, your family image, whatever you do, that only strengthens your ahankara. Now, because it starts strengthening your ahankara, what we call making your identity stronger, that ID you carry from adolescence period, till that time there was no ID, it was parents' ID, you understand? But adolescence period time, you start carrying your own personal ID, then there is a confusion. So what is the confusion? Confusion is between your identity and role confusion. And whole adolescence period continues with this. So this is what we call psychologically the child goes through a lot. And once this happens, slowly the person gets into adulthood. Now earlier, this identity formation and becoming stronger, there is a shift between family to one's own self. Now that has to be sustained, managed. Now this same ahankara starts getting manifested with reference to your career, then your salary and whatnot. Then you start, making your job, achievements, and finally family. Either you create or you join with the family. Now in the process, what happens? This adolescence time and later on in adulthood, it is more visible, which is not visible in adolescence time. That my ego, my ahankara can be either constructive or it can be destructive. So how can you name it that it is constructive or it is destructive? It's very simple. When I am confident enough to take responsibility, please understand, when I am confident enough to take responsibility, that time my ahankara is called constructive. Whereas when I am proud of something or other, and because of pride there is arrogance in me, that time my ahankara is called destructive. So that's why you can see very carefully that how we use our ahankara in a constructive way or destructive way. I would say how our ahankara uses us. That's better word, okay? So that's why we have been discussing this Saucham, etc. earlier, and of course now Indriyartheshu Vairagyam, because this only, if there is no Vairagyam, only Ragam with reference to sense objects, definitely my Ahankara is going to be stronger. So to manage that, we say, look, I need to get into self-discipline. So what we called earlier as Atma Vinigraha. So when I get into discipline, and of course other things we have discussed in before, now I start looking at my Ahankara little differently. Because earlier, if I observe, my Ahankara makes me to feel I am the boss, I am the master. Now, because of self-discipline, I look my Ahankara as the servant of a dharma or a given situation. Can you see the difference? Ahankara becomes the servant of dharma, or you can say a situation. Whereas a common person looks at Ahankara as master of any given situation or dharma. So that means what? One has to be very careful what we talk little bit differently in our day-to-day languages. So how to use this Ahankara not to become my master or master of the situation, but servant of dharma, that we say, I am not doer, but I am an instrument of Ishvara. That's why Ishvara in my life. Interestingly, we have seen this point, when there is Ahankara, there cannot be Ishvara in my life. And if there is Ishvara in my life, there cannot be Ahankara either. So that's why whenever Ahankara is strong in me, definitely there is no Ishvara at all. So that's why what I need to do? So I need to understand very carefully that my Ahankara always strengthened by my instinct. So what we call as instinct identity. So each one of you have your own instinct ID. Now when my mind joins with or supported by or starts fueling my instinct ID, then what happens? Now my Ahankara becomes destructive. Whereas same Ahankara, when it starts joining, supporting my morality, now what happens? Now same Ahankara becomes constructive. And only a constructive Ahankara can manage or balance between the desire and the duties. Whereas a destructive Ahankara will not be able to look at what is my duty and what is my desire. That's why what I generally look at, I don't look at, this is called destructive Ahankara, I don't look at what I should do, but always I dwell upon what others should do. And when I am more interested in others what should do, definitely my Ahankara is what called destructive Ahankara. So that's why that time what happens? The person becomes more egocentric. And of course it has started from the, let us say, childhood and adolescence period much more than adult time. So psychologically, when I am egocentric, let me not get into how fragile I am, what happens, what doesn't happen. That's another level of talking. We'll talk a little later on how to look at, how to address that. So now what happens is, when I work in that way, I start creating one type of circle, you can say one type of, my protection, and in that protection, I try to get buried. So that protection level can be a setup, a given people or situation and surrounding. That's why we say it is not healthy at all. So we highlight you need to have ego. Because without ego, without ahankara, without sense of me and mine, you cannot function, you cannot deliver, you cannot do anything. But my ego should be healthy ego. So how to know this, that whether my ego is healthy or unhealthy? Very simple. Because if my ego does not give me confidence, but it gives me confidence by depending upon something or other. So that means if there is no self-confidence, that means my ego is not healthy at all. So to understand this, the person should be very careful and try to understand how I look at a situation and how I function. Because any ahankara can be called as healthy and unhealthy. Only person can find out, not any other person. So that's why here we say very carefully, any given situation, when ahankara comes up, what we need to do? Yes, we need to allow it, because ahankara is the cause of everything. That's why we say that, from birth, by birth, ahankara has come to us. Because without that we cannot. But how much vivek we are using to handle, to manage. And because of which, what happens? This Ishwararpana Buddhi takes place. That is my most important sadhana. So in short, that ahankara is there and will be there because this is basic survival instinct. Because without that I cannot survive either. But at the same time, I need to look at my ahankara and allowing it to get matured, not remain as raw. And I need to balance, and eventually I must see its limitation so that I start growing out of it. So in short, when this is ahankara, now what is to be done? You have to just look at opposite of ahankara, that is called anahankara. Is it clear? Now, next one says, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Dosanudarshanam. Here, why ahankara becomes strong? As you know, the popular story that the sculptor who was doing beautiful statues, and a great saint comes and says, look, now within 1 month of time you are going to die. Please teach your vidya to somebody so that this will keep continuing. So instead of teaching or handing over the secret of this, so he said, okay, if this is the case, I will confuse Yamaraja. You know this story very well. I have quoted many times. So he had that sort of capability that he could make alive statues, looks like alive. So he created his replica. And in that statues, those statues, he became one statue there. Now the messenger of death came down to catch him right time. They discovered there are so many of him standing. Which one to catch? Because they cannot catch wrong person. They got confused, went back. Look, there are so many of him standing in one place. What to do? Then Lord Death comes down. Okay, I'll find out. Lord Death also got confused. Where? Whom to pull? How to pull? All are one and same. He said, okay, wow. Then he just, pretending, went to one statue and tossed, wow. Understood statue. Then he said, look, actually, the statue is beautiful. The one who has made must be stupid. Look, the hand is beautiful, leg is beautiful, face is so nice, eyes are Really fantastic. But this nose, look how stupid this nose is. In fact, nose was the best. Now what happens to the person who was a statue? He comes out and says, how dare you to say this? Okay, come. This is what I wanted, nothing else. So we have this, there are many stories, you know better, I don't want to get into that. So that means my ahankara is strengthened based on my sense of enjoyment. Me being a bhokta, please understand. Me being a bhokta means enjoyer. With reference to bhogya vastu, with reference to object of experiences, enjoyment. Now my ahankara becomes strong. Whereas same ahankara, when I become a karta, a doer, that fellow will start crying. I remember in the school days, especially when puja comes like this sort of days, things, if there is any work to be done, so these are the works who should come forward. I'll tell you, all the guys will sit, keep quiet. But there is something to be bought from the market. So who wants to join? Do you know? There will be everybody. Do you know why? Because if you go to market, in the name of buying, you will move around, hang around, and also they will give something to eat, okay? So there is sense of enjoyment. I remember this story today because being, today is Dola Purnima, which is very nice, Lord, especially Krishna comes in the vertical mandapam and taking away everywhere. And interestingly, today is eclipse also, not visible to Europe, but here in India it is visible. So that's why we are following it. However, so in short, what I am highlighting here is how the sense of enjoyment is connected to the object. And that sense of enjoyment connected to the object, that means again, that is what ahankara, or you can say ahankara gets the fuel. So this is the fuel of ahankara. So to see differently, says, start seeing what you need to see. Dosha anudarshanam. Very nicely, Adi Shankaracharya goes on and on. So let me little bit talk this point. He says, look, how he looks at very differently that Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Doshanu, Darshanam. He takes it, first line he takes very carefully, that you can look at anything and everything related to this body. Whether it is birth or death or your geriatric problem, of course disease. Remember, and including dukkha, the painful situation that you go through, all these things, please try to understand is a defect. So you need to see the defect in them. It's a very simple way. So that means with reference to good things, you need to see defect. With reference to bad thing also, you need to see defect. In short, even this shall pass away. The good things, good time will pass away. Bad things, bad time also pass away. Including this life also will pass away, don't worry. Again, you will start another fresh innings, okay? With a new player, new background, everything new. Maybe new game, like, this is called pingil ball, this ball, that ball, new games are coming up, okay? God knows, okay? Time will be soft, you will not say pickle ball also will come, okay? Anything and everything nowadays, okay? Now, how it happens, same thing also, you need to see the defect. So what is the defect? What is the defect is very simple. that which is not permanent, that is defective. Seeing impermanence, seeing limitations in anything and everything is appreciating the defect. Not that to see the defect you have to break or you have to run away. Not necessarily. So that is what is being highlighted here. This is the first way of looking at. Then he says, look, other one is, if you want to see that especially janmani garbhavasa yonidvara nisharanam dosha tasya anudarsanam alocanam tatha mrityau dosanudarsanam tatha jarayam prajna sakti tejo nirodha dosanudarsanam paribhutata cha iti. He says, look, another way also you need to look at from the birth, how you stay in the womb. Suppose if I ask you now that stay in your house just 3 by 3 square meter, and you have to stay for 9 months. Doors and windows are closed, completely dark. Will you be able to manage? At least you have time to lie down. You have not time. You have space to lie down. You can move. In fact, you can do sound. You can do anything. Okay. But in mother's womb, what is the space? In fact, you cannot stretch. Okay. That's why somebody told, do you know why I am having knee problem? Because when I was a child, I was always kneeling down all the time inside. So that's why I have a knee problem. However, let us not get into jocular point. So inside the mother's womb, at the worst part is, you don't know or you don't want to eat something, your mother loves that. And whatever mother eats, you have to go through suffer, no choice for you. And during pregnancy, mothers also, they go crazy to eat different food. They try anything and everything that time. And let me not describe further, you can break your head. Remember, who are such a painful situation. Why? Not that it was, don't worry, after death again you are going to go through, okay? Whether it is a human being, if it is at least human womb is better, God knows what womb you are going to go through. Then after that, once you are being born, then you know how difficult it is to come out. So everybody talks. Hey, look, when a woman gives birth, the labor pain is so strong, it is equivalent to breaking some 8 bones, if I am right. So everybody talks that very big way, sophisticated way. We respect mothers, no doubt in it. But nobody talks, poor child, how difficult that fellow goes through to come out. That's why every child gets fainted by default. At least every mother do not get fainted, okay? So what sort of pain? So that also need to be understood very carefully. And of course, as we start growing, everywhere there is only dukkham, dukkham and dukkham. Let us not talk about geriatric problem. Kada kada, dhar dhada, mada mada, all these things happens. Only sound, nothing else. When you sit down, gadrrr, get up, gadrrr. And in between the gas comes much more grrr for others. And the worst part is this dying process. And when this is also being seen, that means what? It is nothing but all are painful. That's why you need to see the limitation. So in short, Dukkham is defect. The pain is defect. At least start seeing. And wherever there is joy, there is also pain. It is exactly like when there is a day, there has to be night. Where there is light, there has to be shadow. So wherever there is pain, there is joy. Wherever there is joy, there is pain. So if you start seeing that dukkham indeed, pain indeed is called dosham, defect. Also sukham also is sukham means happiness or pleasure also is equal to a defect. Now once I start seeing, then what happens? Now I look at myself that whatever comes in my life, I need to go through without taking the credit. Not like present day AI. Anybody and everybody is author. You are a best writer who cannot write ABCD because only taking the credit. So he says, there is nothing to take credit. And more I take credit, don't worry, I have to have some debit somewhere. Because credit and debit always go hand in hand together. But always you look for credit. Will it be possible? That's why what you need to do here very nicely, that this can happen when you have knowledge of yourself. When there is understanding of yourself and your mind is more focused on with yourself rather than what you have. But it is with you who you are. For you, when who you are is more important than what you have, then only you start dropping anything and everything. In fact, everything gets dropped. That indeed is called here Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam.